A man feeling spurned by society retreated into a shack in the mountains. Feeling that God was speaking through him, he decided to write out a book series longer than the Bible itself in which he featured as the main character, carrying out his revenge against the people he hated in real life. Little did people know this wasn't simply self-insert fiction, these were actually his plans. While researching my videos like this one, I often have to dive into all sorts of shady corners of the internet to get some certain hard-to-get files. So naturally, security is important to me, internet security, thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN is a service that can encrypt your data online so that you aren't able to be tracked by anyone, criminal or otherwise. It does so by swapping your location with different servers around the world, hiding your real location. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in 100 different countries. With this, I can bypass all sorts of censorship and geo-restrictions. Surfshark frees your internet browsing by unblocking blocked websites, namely websites your country may have blocked. There, I can find information from all over the world if I need to. Not only is there this perk, but a VPN encrypts your online data and helps to secure your personal information when you use free public Wi-Fi, which can be a goldmine for hackers. If you go out a lot with your laptop like I do while researching, using public Wi-Fi can be prime pickings for all the hackers out there. Think about all the personal information you put online on a daily basis. Using Surfshark will take care of that problem and secure your data so that you can keep your personal data, like your passwords and credit cards, safe. You can even use the app to better monitor your personal data and check for potential breaches of security. You'll even get alerts in real time to help protect your identity. And now you've even got Surfshark's Clean Web feature, which blocks ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, making your trip through the internet just that much safer. So why not get started today? You can use my code DIRETRIP, all one word, to get an extra 3 months free on your subscription. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee as well, so there's no reason not to give it a shot. So go ahead and check out the link in the description to get started on your Surfshark VPN subscription today. And now, on to the content. Lyndon Mcleod was born into an Air Force family in 1974. His father was a Southern man from Arkansas, while his mother was from New Zealand. Genetically, they were both Scottish, something that Lyndon would come to take pride in. Throughout his childhood, the family moved around quite a bit, both overseas in England and within the United States. Given that the family never really stayed in place for more than 1 or 2 years, Lyndon was never actually able to make any friends. Instead, he took to reading books and engaging in a little bit of escapism. Eventually, the family came to settle down quite a bit, with Lyndon going to high school mainly in Ohio and then eventually going on to live in Texas. Lyndon had been a troubled child ever since the age of about 15 years old. From that point onwards, he was in trouble with the law numerous times for various reasons. According to him, he made contact with the police at least 100 times throughout the years, sometimes with even the SWAT teams being involved. This trouble didn't end with the law, as Lyndon made bad choices in other ways as well. When he was about 20 years old, he was finally able to get a girlfriend. The two ended up going on to join a cult called Zentic Farm. This was a traditionalist, polygamist cult, but even so, Lyndon's girlfriend left him there. Despite entering into a polygamist compound, all set to be a man's man surrounded with all the women he could want, he was dumped and left alone. After this, he would go on to spend the rest of his entire life trying to prove how much of a man he was. The cult's slogan was actually, "Quit bitching, start a revolution." This slogan would go on to reverberate through Lyndon's mind for the rest of his life, greatly shaping who he saw himself as a person. He desperately wanted to be seen as a man's man, and he would spend the rest of his days carefully crafting that image. Back on his own, Lyndon came to love the outdoors. Still wanting to present himself as manly as possible, he mainly stuck to jobs involving manual labor, and he refused to go to college or get any sort of professional training. He told those around him that it was simply because he preferred physical labor more. In addition, he got into rock music and motorcycles. However, it would be this interest in motorcycles that would greatly contribute to his downfall. One day, he crashed his bike and injured his neck fairly severely. As a result, he was prescribed opiate painkillers by a doctor. He didn't take these opioids responsibly, coming to really like them. This gradually developed into an addiction. He would come to be addicted to opioids on and off for the next several decades. This addiction to opioids came with an interest in other drugs as well. Lyndon decided to move out to Denver, Colorado, where the marijuana laws were much more lax at the time in order to get into the medical marijuana business. He worked his way up, becoming a manager of his dispensary. However, his co-workers and customers had problems with him time and time again. Lyndon was violent, something that even the customers came to realize. One day in 2013, he completely lost it, pulling a gun on a customer and threatening him.
He was always a really strange guy, like I would describe him as like a military wannabe.
He'd do graffiti on the walls of grenades and guns, and he tried grabbing me, and we got into a tussle, and I threw him down, and he reached to his right pocket, and he pulled out a 380 with a laser on it.
At the time, I didn't realize how much danger there was actually present there.
He was once again involved with the police, coming to be arrested and ultimately pleading guilty to charges of menacing. Lyndon, seeing himself as an alpha male, soon came to terms with the fact that he was no alpha if he wasn't actually leading anyone. He was all alone. Instead, he gradually came to identify more with the Sigma male meme. If you haven't heard of it before, a Sigma male is basically the alpha male version of a lone wolf, someone who sticks to their own strength and doesn't rely on others.
What I was missing when I was trying to survive as a quote alpha, with money and bitches and cars and all that shit. Now I have as a Sigma.
Lyndon had nobody he could truly call a friend. By his own admission, he had nothing but bad relationships all throughout his entire life, having virtually nobody that he could connect with. You may realize that Lyndon would be the common denominator in all of these failed relationships, and surprisingly, Lyndon himself would actually agree with you, owning up to ruining many of his friendships and relationships over the years. While he claimed to be proud of his success over time, he actually faced failure after failure over the years. To his credit, he did keep trying, starting up new endeavors each time he failed, but the failure did get to him. He came to choose to believe that he was actually a great man, perfectly suited to his surroundings, the only problem being that he wasn't in the correct environment. He felt that, due to his genetics, he would only be fit living in an area like Scotland or somewhere similar. That's how he came to cope with his defeat.
And I wanted to understand why I was the way I was. And it turned out that my archetype, my personality type, and my genetics actually is pro-social. It is a decent way to live, but only within a certain milieu, only within the highlands of Scotland or on the Mongolian steppe, or, like the Kalenjin in Kenya, you know them?
After 11 failed business ventures, Lyndon decided to try one more thing: tattoos. Lyndon was a very tatted up man. Over the years, he had come to be fascinated with them. During his time as a customer, he met a man named Jeremy. While Lyndon had no idea how to actually do tattoos or run a tattoo shop, Jeremy knew how to do both. Jeremy expressed an interest in opening his own shop, and Lyndon quickly decided to invest. The two soon became business partners in the shop. They opened a tattoo shop in 2013 called All Hearts Enterprise. Problems soon started to form. Many problems. For instance, Lyndon asked Jeremy to take him on as an apprentice for free. The two got into an argument when Jeremy didn't want to do it. It didn't take long at all for Jeremy to realize that Lyndon wasn't going to be a viable business partner. The other managers didn't like him either, with one saying, it was him against everybody else, and his opinion was always right, even though he had zero experience in the industry. And everybody else in there had been doing it for 10 years. Jeremy himself felt bad that he hadn't gotten a good read on Lyndon in the time he knew him. While he had seen cracks, he didn't see how deep these problems really ran. He said, I saw problems with him on and off, mentally, but I just didn't know what I'd gotten myself into.
He wanted me to apprentice him basically for free and to pay no dues to me or the industry, and I wasn't going to help him become a tattooer, and that enraged him pretty bad.
One day, Lyndon took a friend into the shop and demanded that the artist at All Hearts give him a tattoo for free. When the artist on duty expressed that they would very much rather be paid for their work, Lyndon reacted with an explosion of rage and fury. He began throwing $100 bills all over them, making it rain while screaming, "Is that enough money, motherfucker?"
So I had a very successful business. I was an entrepreneur from about the age of 33, but I was an owner operator. So that meant I did most of the work, but I did have employees. I had business partners, people that helped me, but I did the majority of the work.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy and his girlfriend had tried to be friends with Lyndon, but it was always difficult. They had been over to his house a couple of times, noting that it was a very weird place. They described it, saying, "The outside of it was army green and black, just very uninviting. He had a lot of weird artwork, skulls that were spray-painted black, animal skulls everywhere. It just didn't seem like a home. I saw real hand grenades and thought it was a joke. There were guns stashed in the walls and floors." Lyndon was able to get women from time to time at this point in his life, but his relationships were always riddled with problems. Jeremy's girlfriend spoke of this, saying, "He didn't like women to have any say-so or any authority in anything, so I started noticing that. I thought, that's enough for me. I can't stand an alpha male prick." Lyndon had met his girlfriend at the time, Melissa, on the internet. She would always come into the shop with him, scratches on her face, seeming timid, possibly even scared of him. Early on, Melissa didn't quite see the writing on the wall. She didn't see the true man that Lyndon really was, only the character he loved to portray himself as. After only 6 months of dating, the two had bought a house together and started making some money on the side by growing and selling weed. Lyndon wasn't the best with business, so most of their expenses ended up as credit card debt on Melissa's part. She spoke of her time with him, saying, "He was a master manipulator, but he couldn't hold his anger in at some points. Within the first year of us dating, he had terrible road rage attacks and he would scream at people. He had a big truck that was covered in rhino liner. This woman was trying to turn left and he passed her and he scraped down the whole side of her car, taking her mirror off, screaming at her like a raging lunatic. I wasn't there, but I know that's what he did because that's what he told me and that's how he is." When he started to show his true self, which definitely was angry and violent, misogynistic, just awful, an awful person, I was terrified for my life, and I couldn't wait to move out of that state to get away from him. I did not want to press charges or anything because I felt like that would just make him angry, and I already knew how much he was into revenge. I didn't trust that I would be kept safe if I tried to report him in any way, so I didn't. It wasn't only Melissa. Lyndon had a history of domestic violence spanning years. The police had gotten at least 11 different calls out to Lyndon's home on accusations of domestic violence alone. All of the employees of All Hearts came together and agreed that the business was failing due to how aggressive Lyndon was to customers and how uncomfortable they were in the shop. No artist wanted to work in the shop anymore either. In Jeremy's own words, "All my buddies got sick of his shit and they all quit." Both Jeremy and one other manager decided to cut ties with Lyndon. The business was effectively dead in the water. Lyndon was left alone with the business and he simply stopped paying the bills. After his failure to file paperwork or pay on the building, he eventually let go of the lease. Lyndon was infuriated over his lack of success in breaking into the industry. His fury was made even worse when he had to see the building being taken over by a new tattoo shop. A woman named Alicia Cardenas took over the building, using it as part of the nearby Saul tribe establishment, but eventually coming to make it into her own smaller shop. Jeremy formally told Lyndon that he wanted out of the business and out of their friendship entirely, a clean break. They met up in person on a public sidewalk to shake hands and say goodbye. There was no argument. Jeremy had thought the meeting went pretty well, all things considered. Little did he know, Lyndon was feeling betrayed, humiliated, and angry. Jeremy came to know that the break wasn't quite as clean as he thought it was when Melissa showed up at his front door, giving him a warning that Lyndon was out to kill him. She said that Lyndon was actually very fragile and emotional, contrary to the Sigma facade, and that his feelings were easily hurt and he tended to hold on to grudges far longer than a normal person. Melissa ended their meeting by saying that Lyndon's anger towards Jeremy was so intense that something was bound to happen. Alicia, the person currently operating a tattoo shop in the previous All Hearts building, came to be visited by Lyndon one day. She didn't know him personally, but she knew of him. His personality was pretty well known, and not in a good way. Lyndon approached her, possibly to try and become business partners with her as well, but she didn't engage. She didn't want to give him the time of day, knowing of his angry outbursts. When his attempt to reintegrate himself with the new owner of the shop failed, Lyndon left once again, angry that he didn't get the warm welcome he wanted. This was Lyndon's 12th big business failure. Melissa had left him. He had no more income. He was now 42 years old and had nothing left to his name. He didn't understand what he had done to ruin his business. He felt that his business partners had simply decided to betray him, rip him off, and leave him out in the cold.
I noticed on the 12th time, this last failure, there was so much malice involved. My business partners had ripped me off, locked me out, used the law enforcement and the legal system in order to effect this. I was told, quote, "You have no standing."
He tried to fight back in court, but the courts determined that he had no legal standing and no right to sue. He said he was defrauded, but they disagreed. Lyndon was left with no choice but to sell everything he owned, even his home. When he did sell his home, the new owners were left with confusion at the state of the house. Once inside, they found several heavily disguised gun safes all throughout several rooms of the home, in addition to skulls spray-painted on all manners of walls and surfaces. The man and his wife joked around, saying, "He just disappeared off the face of the earth when we bought the house. My wife and I joke that he's changed his name and moved out of the country."
There are numerous hidden gun safes in the walls of this house, spray-painted skulls on areas of the house. He just disappeared off the face of the earth when we bought the house.
Jeremy came to feel that he was likely going to become the prime target for Lyndon's rage. He said, "I wasn't that scared, but he was a big guy, and I didn't think it'd be anything to do with weapons, guns, actual murdering. I figured we were gonna fight. I figured he's pissed at me, he's gonna find me out somewhere, we're gonna fist fight." Now homeless, broke, and alone, Lyndon needed a new goal in his life. All he had left to his name was a bit of land out in the mountains outside of Denver. However, there was nothing on that land. He ended up living in a tent for half a year, hunting for food and pooping into a hole in the ground. He wouldn't go on to get another job, instead mooching off of others as much as he could. He seethed in his anger, repeatedly making comments that he wanted to kill all that he felt had wronged him. He had a little bit of money left over from selling weed. Using this, he bought a shipping container. Having seen the recent trend of shipping containers being converted into tiny homes, he wanted to try that for himself. While he said online that he was mainly just into the tiny house movement, his writings made it appear that he was insecure about having little possessions in particular. He said that he lived this way because he simply preferred to live modestly, but it was very likely that living this way was necessary due to budget constraints. The night after he moved into his new shipping container home on the property, a terrible snowstorm picked up. A tree fell over and landed right on top of the tent that he had been sleeping in the night before. In shock, Lyndon felt that this must be a sign. This must have meant that he was on the right path, he thought. Lyndon Mcleod had been an atheist since he was 19 years old, describing himself as the militant, obnoxious sort of atheist. However, ever since his recent feelings of fate/being on the right path, he had become more open to the idea of religion. That's when he had a dream one night that would change his life. In that dream, he was out in Scotland, surrounded by tall rocks, when a book began to form out of the ether in front of him. From that point onward, while he didn't join any religion specifically, he believed that God existed and was personally sending him on a mission. He was now determined to write a book. He sat down and started to write, feeling like he wasn't writing it himself, but he was transcribing something that God had given him, something akin to the Bible. He felt like his life had been saved by this new goal. Before, he had been at the end of his rope. Now he felt invigorated. Born again, in a way. Living alone out in the woods in the mountains with no internet, no TV, and very few methods of communication, all he really had to do was work on his new book. He admitted that he wrote the entire book non-stop, taking breaks only to sleep. The book was a complete stream of consciousness. He even admitted that most of it was, quote, garbage that he needed to discard, only keeping the remaining half. He didn't know how to write and didn't follow any of the traditional rules as to what makes a story flow. Regardless, he was happy with the outcome.
There's a certain madness in anything grand, right? To the extent that this book has grandeur, there's madness baked right into it.
Over the period of only a few months, he was able to bust out 2,400 pages, 1.2 million words in total, making it longer than the actual Bible itself. He said that he felt the book existed as a mind virus, a method to implant ideas into people.
The book is a mind virus. I purposely created it to get information in people's minds. And so there's a little bit of a leisure domain, a little bit of a trick going on there, but no malice, no malice. And I wanted to introduce that idea to men like me that are overtly masculine and macho and all that stuff, but feel deeply.
He called the book Sanction and submitted it to Amazon. Disappointingly, he was told that it was far too long. He was forced to break it up into 3 parts, forming Sanction 1, 2, and 3. The book, to put it very simply, is about him. The main character of the story is actually named Lyndon Mcleod. Much like Chris Chan before him, he wrote himself into his story, originally having another character, a scientist, as the main character, but soon using his own insert to overcome all other elements in the story and become the main focus. The character of Lyndon didn't only share his name and personality, he shared his upbringing, his life history, and even his career. In this book, Lyndon is a self-made young man who wants riches. Money, cars, clothes, alcohol, and women. But he finds his life lacking without love and honor, a way to express himself. The story seemed to start as a way to express that there is more to life than success and material things, but it didn't stay that way. In the book, the scientist character discovers Lyndon and wants to study what genetically makes a person into a criminal. However, in his studies, he actually finds that Lyndon is the perfect human specimen, being much deeper, smarter, and thoughtful than anyone else on Earth. He decides to take his genes and implant them into everyone on Earth in order to accelerate mankind into the future. While the book is partially science fiction, it lists many other real-world figures and movements as well. The book contains blatant threats towards Ben Shapiro, Sam Harris, Antifa, and the BLM movement. The story, of course, takes a darker turn when it gets to the point in his life where he was, as he felt, betrayed by his friends. After his many failures, the character of Lyndon came to feel that murder and revenge were the only ways to move forward. The book is the ultimate combination of both a revenge fantasy and an ego trip. In the book, the character of Lyndon is listed as killing 46 people in total, all of them mentioned by their real names. Their real-life names. He didn't bother to even change the names of the people that he hated in real life much as he didn't change his own name in the book. He describes himself in the book as a Sigma, the perfect man, saying that the women in his life are merely inferior beings who live with their heads in the clouds. Ultimately, he wanted to start a world war in order to bring his visions of the perfect traditionalist society into reality. In the book, Lyndon breaks into the apartment of and killed a man he knew named Michael Swinyard, who he worked with in real life while he was selling marijuana. In the book, he stakes out a poker party Michael is throwing before ultimately gaining access to his real-life condo near Cheeseman Park, disguising himself as a police officer, gaining access, and shooting him. He then robs him and takes off with his dog in his van. In Sanction 2, the character of Lyndon moves on to kill 6 people in a mass shooting. In the book, he fantasizes of wearing all sorts of tactical gear, coming in with guns a-blazing, and entering into the Saul Tribe tattoo shop. He opens fire, killing 2 tattoo artists, one of which is Alicia, the current owner of the shop. He wrote of Jeremy in the books as well, extensively, spending actual thousands of words detailing how much he hated him and how he had been betrayed. He fantasized about breaking into Jeremy's shop, shooting a woman, and killing Jeremy as he tattoos a customer. After this section in the book, he wrote, "With Michael dead, and now Jeremy, he could focus on the lower score people that remained." The book reads, "Michael and Jeremy were personal. The rest were more to pay the universe back for its banquet." Lyndon later stated that he had to use real names in the book because he wanted to, quote, take full responsibility, and so that his self-proclaimed enemies would know exactly who he wanted to threaten and insult. When it came to his own name, though, he decided to hide behind a pen name, Roman Mcleod, possibly to hide that the main character was just a fantasy version of himself, but that's mere speculation. After putting the book up on Amazon, he was lucky to have a few big names on Twitter, mostly in the red pill sphere, come to read it. They were able to promote it and spread the word on the platform. Eventually, against all odds, the series became pretty popular within its circle. People seemed to love it, and it was getting him a chunk of change. He began to sell physical copies, merch, and even open up a Patreon account as well. It was in these next months that Lyndon really decided to lean into the tough guy character as hard as he possibly could. He went to the dentist and had his teeth filed down into fangs. He tried to make himself out to be the character in his book as much as he could, even tattooing Sanction across his knuckles. Lyndon was a big fan of an internet personality named Bronze Age Pervert. He frequently interacted with him on Twitter and shared his posts. He posted photos of himself with BAP's book, showing many notes scrawled down in the margins. He had underlined one passage in particular for the picture, one that reads, "The motivation for this is the nerdishness and also somewhat the Jewish way of thinking, or the Judaizing tendency that promotes facility with words and number, but approaches mental deficiency and even retardation when it comes to anything visual. The Jewish hatred of matter, an ancient prejudice that precedes the Bible, and the hatred also for beauty that they share with other Semitic peoples, and many others besides, all of this comes together to promote this kind of aggressive nerdishness." God, that's a mouthful. More and more celebrities within that sphere, the right-leaning red pill crowd, began to interact with Lyndon all over the internet. He was eating it up, and so were his fans. People pushed more and more for him to appear on podcasts and talk shows. This is when a rapper named Zuby, who has a long-running podcast in which he interviews various people, decided to host an episode in which he would talk with him about his books. He appeared on episode 64 of Real Talk with Zuby in 2019.
One thing modern society does is it tells men like myself and my compatriots, it tells us that we need to settle down, not be so macho, right? It's called toxic masculinity.
Oh yeah,
we don't
I know all about that.
You know all about it, man. And we're told constantly that we're the problem. We're too aggressive. We're too macho. And I wanted to understand why I was the way I was.
For years, Lyndon had been an on-again, off-again friend with a woman named Helen Zuman. Helen had actually been a member of the same polygamous cult as Lyndon back in the day, although not at the same time. They met online, both members of the tattoo community. Given that they were friends, Helen decided to invite him to speak on her podcast as well to talk about his books. Shortly after, all contact with him went completely dark and she never heard from him again. Lyndon felt that he had finally found a community, a new tribe, now that he had found a bunch of people out there who liked his book and related to his views. He felt that he was finally able to connect with some people and he wanted to try some new things. First off, he wanted to make Fanfiction into a movie, which was admittedly going to be pretty difficult. Second, he got pretty active on Twitter, mingling with all sorts of pretty big names within his sphere. He got pretty close with a lot of right-wing media personalities. He never did get over his beef with the tattoo shop, but he was at least happy to have some new people around him. Or possibly beneath him.
I was alone in the wilderness for years, abandoned by my tribe, usurped, betrayed, overthrown, like
in a literal sense.
Literally,
in a literal
like
sense.
no joke, like really fucked over by my tribe, and now I have a new tribe, and they're loyal to me, you know, and I haven't tested the limits of that loyalty, but for where we're at now, they have shown supreme loyalty to me.
Not all was good by any means. Given how Twitter often goes, Lyndon got into countless arguments with people who disagreed with him. Unlike most arguments though, his were speckled with real-life threats all about. He often spoke of wanting to start some sort of uprising. In 2019, he tweeted, "Nobody is scared of anyone anymore. The state has stopped 99% of alphas from engaging in retributive violence. They/we are too scared to lose all we have. That's why betas and females are scamming/disrespecting incessantly. Until real alphas risk jail, nothing will change. #Sanction." He debated on whether or not women should remain chaste before marriage, saying that women having sex outside of marriage led to the downfall of society. He wrote, "I love religion. All religions place a massive sanction on female premarital sex. Religion demands virginity in women." At one point though, on his original Twitter account, he got into an argument with a rival of his within the same political sphere after this rival expressed criticism toward the writing of a friend. So, Lyndon threatened to behead his wife and children. This is where his first Twitter account got suspended. Not only that, but the FBI paid a visit out to his home to ask him a few questions. Eventually, the book started to leak out to people outside of Lyndon's very specific circle. Negative reviews started coming in, labeling the book as ultra-violent, misogynistic, and racist. One reviewer wrote, "This book is packed full of rants on diversity, women, and globalization." Another reviewer wrote, There are fantasies of killing people involved in the BLM movement and bizarre threats to Ben Shapiro / Sam Harris and others. Another seemingly sympathetic reviewer said that the book featured many racial slurs all over the place, writing, "Taboo topics like incest, murder, racial inferiority, and genocide are written in an almost casual tone. It puts language to what most people secretly think and then suppress in the deepest recesses of their hearts." Lyndon, losing his sanity more and more as his online clout went to his head, decided to go out and threaten Jeremy once again. He printed out posters for his sanction books and took them to Jeremy's tattoo shop, plastering them all over the doors and windows. It seems that he wanted Jeremy to read it, but Jeremy likely didn't even know what it was. If he had read it, he would have seen that he was killed within the book and his girlfriend was beheaded, but he didn't.
I was pretty much his #1 target. So I broke that business off with him, and he hated that. I never would have thought it would come to something like this. I guess he wanted me to read it to see that in the book, a character was that was his own name, Lyndon Mcleod, was gonna kill me and then behead her.
Lyndon's ex-girlfriend, Melissa, had managed to stay hidden for years after leaving him. That is, until one day he managed to find her and her business email online. He emailed her a photo of himself with his book, urging her to read it. She said, "There was also a piece of paper from a notebook. I'm guessing it was a journal, whatever, and it said my name, and on the bottom it said, moral murder, and it was a bunch of scribbles. I was again terrified for my life, because it's easy to find people on the internet where they live." Lyndon began to have multiple psychiatric episodes, usually involving violence. On at least 2 of the occasions, the law enforcement was forced to intervene. On one of these occasions, a German man that Lyndon interacted with online became very concerned with his behavior. He was so concerned that Lyndon was going to commit some sort of violent act that he began to document every concerning thing that he would write online. The man, Andre Thiel, said that he had read Lyndon's book and participated in his chats, where he came across threats time and time again. He wrote the Denver police, saying, "I think that there is a small but undeniable possibility that the accused may commit a terrorist attack. I cannot in good conscience say that he will act with certainty, but I can say that if he should act, the result would be devastating. He then would stop at nothing." In addition to the Denver police, he also submitted a tip to the FBI. However, nothing would come out of either of them. The Denver police said that they didn't believe Lyndon was living within the Denver city limits and didn't act. The FBI seemingly didn't react either. By this point in his life, you might be thinking that Lyndon was actually making some pretty good money from his books, but it was quite the contrary. He was getting deeper and deeper into credit card debt. He was forced to move in with one woman named Anne and another named Amanda in January of 2021. Both Anne and Amanda were actually big fans of his, but they soon came to find that he was, in their own words, unhinged, and that he was very likely abusing opiates again. Lyndon confided to Anne that he was depressed, so she suggested that he turn his emotions into art. This was when he decided to make a documentary-style podcast, one that he would call Warhorse. It was originally supposed to be a podcast talking about the importance of horses in the formation of civilization, but it quickly became yet another self-insert project in which he would do nothing but show off how cool he was. While he started out by simply filming shots of himself on horses and on his motorcycle to use in the podcast, they quickly became the main focus of the movie, as the movie came to be entirely made up of random shots of Lyndon doing things that he felt make him look tough and badass. This was while the original concept of the podcast and horses in general were dropped in favor of another display of manliness. Notably though, in the movie, he is shown in tactical gear with a supply of weaponry all throughout. In the movie, Lyndon was both the only character and the narrator. It's mainly just a collection of drawings, still photos, animal skulls, totems, war references, and a periodic rambling narration where Lyndon talks about war while imposed over clips of him riding a motorcycle. More concerningly though, the video shows Lyndon stalking the Saul tribe tattoo shop. The movie contains some handwritten doomsday messages written by Lyndon, along with many shots of him dressed for battle in an outfit that people might confuse for SWAT armor. In fact, he can be seen with the word police written across his chest in white. One day, though, while working on the movie, Lyndon was having a medical procedure done in Salt Lake City. Anne flew out to be by his side when they got into an argument and he punched her. This began their falling out, and Anne didn't want to be around him anymore. She left him with $20,000, a bike, and a van to continue filming. Not only did he ghost her and run off with all of it, she later came to find that he had actually stolen thousands more from her. Lyndon's online posts, also posted on a closed Telegram group, showed that he was becoming more and more extreme over time. While some people out there might have called him a white supremacist or something along those lines, he preferred to describe himself as being into militant traditionalism, believing that society was on the verge of collapse. At one point, Lyndon sent one of his other ex-roommates, Amanda Knight, a text asking if she would join him in Denver, promising that he would gift her with a flamethrower. At first, she thought he must be joking, but that was until he sent her some pictures of it. Angry, he said, "It's like nobody takes one word I say seriously, which I suppose I deserve, for we get what we deserve in life, eh? But it is strange to be completely serious and still have people think I'm joking." She reached out to the authorities, saying, "I told him that I felt like he was threatening. I felt like his energy, the way he changed, his mentality. I was like, he needs some help. He's hurting." Again, though, nothing was done. Denver attempted to contact the county in which Amanda made her calls, but they were unsuccessful. They were able to contact Amanda directly, but the tip never came as far as even having a report written about it. Lyndon professed on Twitter that, at one point, he was arrested on federal weapons charges. He said that he was eventually found not guilty, saying specifically, "I had a $75,000 bond for a weapons charge. I didn't even shoot those cholo motherfuckers." It was around this time that, according to those within his circle, he started to attempt to groom underage girls as well. His Twitter rants spiraled further and further, ranting about the police, societal norms, and weak men, writing posts such as, "Our entire society is made up of shitty little fucks who insult badasses and get away with it because law enforcement and social norms protect the weak from the strong. I'm over it. The weak better buckle up. Shit is about to get real." He talked about how men were being suppressed and how they needed to commit what he called male honor violence, which he says is the freedom to assault others as revenge against anything they may take as disrespect. In turn, he started using the hashtag "Make America Retributive Again." He said, "You can't treat the most aggressive men of your society like shit and expect to survive." And, "Aggro white males are violent and will be more violent as they are made irrelevant by a country that hates them. Their limbic system is in revolt against the modern world. War is coming." Not much is known about what Lyndon did during the next few months. He went dark to all of his friends and acquaintances, mostly living alone, only popping into Twitter from time to time. What is clear is that he began to prepare for his own little day of retribution. He got together all of his tactical gear and weaponry that he had stockpiled over the years and threw them all into his van. He put all the files for Sanction and Warhorse onto an SD card, as well as his passwords, and mailed them to Anne, providing instructions on how to sell it all online for some money. Then, he decided to make his fantasies within his novels into a reality. December 27th, 2021. At 5:25 p.m., Lyndon pulled up to the Saul Tribe tattoo shop in his van. He was wearing all black tactical gear and carrying a rifle when he entered into the shop. Alyssa and her co-worker Alicia were working in what used to be the All Hearts portion of the building, while Alicia's husband, Jimmy, was working in the other half of the building. Lyndon pulled up his rifle, first shooting Alicia and then Alyssa, killing them both. Jimmy looked through the doorway into Alyssa's space when he realized what was happening. Then Lyndon shot him as well. Being hit in the collarbone, one of his lungs was punctured. He fell to the ground. He, along with a few other customers, hid under a bench. Bleeding out, Jimmy watched Lyndon's feet shuffle back and forth through the building as he played dead as well as he could. Once Lyndon was no longer within eyesight, 2 customers helped Jimmy to flee the building. The Denver police soon got a call that a shooting had taken place inside of a local business, the Soul Tribe Tattoo and Piercing. When the police arrived, they found 2 women dead inside, Alicia Cardenas and Alyssa Gunn Maldonado. Jimmy was rushed to the hospital shortly after. Then at around 5:30 on 6th Street in Bannock, Lyndon arrived at Jeremy's shop, which also had an attached area that he used as his apartment. He exited his van, getting out and going up to one of the doors. He knocked on the door and Jeremy's girlfriend came to check through the peephole. She immediately felt something was off when Lyndon said that he had a delivery for Jeremy, pronouncing his last name incorrectly. Not only that, but being that late in the evening, it was a very unusual time for deliveries, and nobody had ever used that particular door of the shop to deliver before. She told Lyndon that they weren't interested. Lyndon did leave for about 10 minutes, but he was soon back with a sledgehammer. He began to knock down the door. Hearing the loud banging, Jeremy debated on shooting at the intruder with his own gun. But given that his girlfriend and infant child were in the room, he decided to instead take them to shelter in the shop. Making their way in, they had to dodge bullets as Lyndon began to fire through the portion of the door he had knocked down. 6 shots came through, with several barely missing the baby's crib. Taking cover in the tattoo shop, the family heard an explosion. A few employees ran in, saying that their van had exploded and was burning outside. Lyndon had given up, placed some sort of explosive on their car, and fled the scene. Lyndon, acting out his book, next went to Michael Swinyard's condo building near Cheeseman Park. Just as in the story, he forced his way into his room, decked out in tactical gear, and shot the 67-year-old man to death. He then left the building and continued down his path. It wasn't long before gunfire erupted at the intersection of 8th Avenue and Zuni Street. This was where a police officer came across Lyndon and began to exchange fire. While nobody was injured, the police car was hit and disabled. Taking this chance, Lyndon fled the scene while the officer was unable to pursue him. He then left the city of Denver, moving on to the city of Lakewood. Right before 6 p.m., Lyndon arrived at the Lucky 13 tattoo shop on Kipling Street in Lakewood. He entered into the shop and, in less than 10 seconds, he spent a whole magazine of ammo to kill his next victim, 38-year-old Danny Schofield, a father of 3 and tattoo artist that he had previously known. Shortly after, officers received reports of the gunfire at Lucky 13. They sped out to the Belmar shopping area where Lyndon had made his way out to. Lyndon entered into the Ted's Montana Grill in the Belmar shopping district. He pulled out a gun and poured himself a drink, pointing that gun at families with children while screaming. Playing out his power fantasy, he yelled, "Guess who's in charge now?" while threatening everyone around him and screaming about being an alpha.
Get the fuck away! Yeah? Well, I guess who's in charge? It ain't you, bitch! Fuck off! I just wanted a drink, you stupid cunt. What?
Officers soon spotted his car there, near a Wells Fargo bank in the modern shopping district, and saw him leave the shop with his gun. Lyndon fired upon the cops, and they fired back. Lyndon made his way into the Hyatt House Hotel, likely looking for a place to hide out. He there spoke to the clerk, a woman named Sarah Steck. Sarah wasn't even scheduled to work that night. She was merely only covering for her sick coworker when Lyndon walked in, got into a short argument with her, and shot her. He left the hotel in less than 30 seconds. About 1 minute later, at an intersection, a Lakewood police officer named Ashley Ferris saw Lyndon and ordered him to drop his weapon. He didn't, brazenly pulling up his gun and shooting the officer in the abdomen. The bullet went all the way through, damaging her sciatic nerve and leaving her paralyzed in her right leg. Ashley, falling to the ground, pulled her gun back up and fired several shots at Lyndon, hitting him in the side. Lyndon attempted to run, moving several steps away before collapsing to the ground behind the police car. For a further 40 seconds, Ashley laid on the ground before another officer arrived to drag her to safety. 3 other officers then arrived and surrounded Lyndon, who rolled onto his back and stopped moving. He died then and there as his rampage finally came to an end. Searching Lyndon's van, they found an additional 400 rounds of ammunition, multiple more weapons, and even 2 sets of handcuffs. It's unknown how far he might have gone or what he planned to do. Ashley Ferris, seriously wounded, was rushed to the hospital and went into surgery. Luckily, she was expected to make a full recovery. The police force released a statement saying, "The entire Lakewood police family will be here to support Ashley Ferris and her family as she embarks on this recovery process." Ashley was soon hailed as a hero. Jimmy was also being treated at the hospital in critical condition, but he was expected to survive. Sarah Steck, only 28 years old, was rushed to the hospital as well, but she passed away due to her injuries. The district attorney soon cleared a second police officer, Brianna Hagan, of any wrongdoing when she shot at Lyndon during a traffic stop previously. The DA said, Agents Hagen and Ferris and their fellow officers from multiple agencies responded swiftly and bravely to end this spree of senseless violence in our community. Agent Ferris demonstrated particular heroism in returning fire while gravely wounded herself, and our community owes her and all of our law enforcement partners a debt of gratitude for their service during this tragic event. The police originally had no idea of the motive behind the attack. Given that they had mainly occurred at tattoo parlors, it was evident that they were at least coordinated and connected in some way. When it came to be revealed that Lyndon Mcleod was behind the attacks, it's sad to say that nobody who knew him personally was surprised. One of his ex-girlfriends came forward with the police to show them his books, which she called his revenge fantasies. The police decided that if they dug in, they might find a motive, and right they were. The man whose wife and child were previously threatened by Lyndon on Twitter was similarly unsurprised, posting a tweet about the incident in which he didn't share disbelief, but gave a sense that he felt something like this may happen. Anne came forward to say that she felt that Lyndon's terrible financial state and debt may have been the largest part of why he became more dangerous. She felt that it was likely what sent him over the edge in the first place. She said, "That's when I started to see some things change. I truly believe that I think he was running out of money, and I think that's what led him to do it." This was when Anne received the SD card that Lyndon had previously mailed to her before the massacre. There, she found the 47-minute completed Warhorse movie along with his books and the rights to them. She was led to believe that this was done in order to recuperate some of the money he once stole from her. She soon decided that she would indeed go through with selling the movie, putting it up for sale on his own website. It wasn't long before a trailer for the movie leaked out onto Twitter as well. Jeremy, who found out that he was mentioned well over 100 times within the sanction books, found the movie massively distasteful. He said, "Nobody should make money off of that. It's terrible. I know people are fascinated by killers, but I don't think anybody should own that movie at all." Anne wrote on the website that the proceeds from the profits would go to the victims of the crime. But before she was even selling the movie, it was actually already out there, having been shared among some of Lyndon's closest fans. For a while, it was spread on YouTube as an unlisted video. These fans released a trailer for the film, asking the public to look for whatever hidden meanings the movie may contain. Amanda, Lyndon's other previous roommate from the flamethrower incident, appears to have been actually running the sales on the website. She said that, although she understood the criticism she was getting, she said that her friends were traumatized as well, saying, "People have to heal. People have to survive. We're not rich." Jimmy obviously refused to watch the movie himself, but he was shown a screenshot of the film in which Lyndon was dressed in his tactical outfit. He said, "He was wearing that same helmet as what's in the movie. At first, I thought it was the police who shot me."
Believe me, there's many times I wanted to give up. When I was in the hospital, I had crazy thoughts, and I didn't want to be here anymore. I'm gonna be okay, I know it's gonna take time, but there's no doubt in my mind that I'm gonna be fine, and I'm gonna see this through in a good way.
The sanction books remained up for sale on Amazon for 2 days after the attacks before they were abruptly removed with no explanation. Amazon would not respond for comment on the issue. Oddly, though, his author page still remains to this day. On December 29th, a memorial was held outside of the Saul Tribe tattoo shop in order to honor the victims of the shooting. Even before that, friends and family had been placing flowers all around the shop and gathering to pray. During the memorial, a large crowd of people gathered to light candles in remembrance. Sarah Steck's best friend, Devin, launched a fundraiser to raise money for her family shortly after. It quickly reached well over $12,000. Devin said that the money would go for funeral costs and unexpected bills, ending by saying that Sarah was loved and touched so many people's lives. A business in Lakewood called Tobacco Leaf was also hosting a fundraising event for Sarah's family as well, which raised a further $5,000. Local tattoo shops, mainly one called Modified Madness, organized an event to raise money for the other families of the victims of the crimes. Helen Zuman, who hadn't heard from Lyndon since their podcast together, had to hear about his rampage on the news. She said on her next podcast, "In the year and a half since he'd disappeared, he'd chosen armor over the heart. He'd turned himself into a fungus-plagued cicada, hollowed himself out. In the time I'd known him, I maintained hope that he'd find his way back from rage and willful isolation and find his place in the family of humans." The rapper Zuby deleted his video in which he interviewed Lyndon at some point after the shooting. The man from Germany who originally informed the FBI was left racked with guilt when he realized his complaint was ignored and nothing was ever done in the end. He said, I'm depressed. I ask myself every day, should I have done more? Ashley Ferris, the officer who shot Lyndon, made a full recovery. She was named the Officer of the Month by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. The Lakewood Police Department awarded her both a Purple Heart and a Medal of Distinguished Service. She was able to go back to work in May after 2 surgeries and hundreds of hours of physical therapy. The irony that Lyndon had lost a battle with and was killed by a woman was lost on nobody. In November of 2022, the Chicano Murals of Colorado Project released a documentary called These Storied Walls. This documentary was made in tribute to Alicia. Parts of the films were shot only 5 weeks before the shooting took place. In October, some of Alicia's art was featured in an exhibit at the History Colorado Theater called The Return of the Corn Mothers Exhibit. Several murals of her were painted around Denver by both her friends and other artists. Many of the people who called Lyndon a friend near the end of his life were left battling how they felt about their association with him. They struggled with whether or not they should have seen it coming and whether or not they did enough to change him or even stop him before it was too late. After dozens of interactions with the police led to basically nothing, lawmakers called for an investigation into the police response to Lyndon. He had been reported multiple times by multiple people to multiple agencies, and in the end, nothing was ever done about his concerning behavior. He had written specifics of what he wanted to do in his books, even calling out his victims by name, but still nothing was ever done about it. Even after very direct threats of violence to people online, still nothing was done about it. One of Lyndon's former roommates, speaking of sanction, wrote, "The very fact of writing it down sealed his fate. Maybe he thought it would be cathartic. I think in the end, once he wrote it down, he had to live it out." The German national who reported him to the FBI said that his biggest fear was that the books, the movie, and of course the murders may go on to inspire copycats. He wished that Lyndon would have never wrote the books in the first place and simply lived out the rest of his days out alone in the mountains. He ended by saying, "This killing spree is the 4th volume of Sanction. He has signed his book with blood." Lyndon spent his entire life trying to mask his own insecurities. Ever since being left alone among a community of polygamists, his ego never quite recovered. While you may feel that this video is hating on masculine men, it really isn't. Quite the contrary, actually, as Lyndon was anything but the masculine image he tried so hard to project. He was a man so fragile that, instead of owning up to his own failures, blamed everyone else around him to the point of writing a book longer than the entire Bible about how much he hated them and how superior he was. He chose to kill several people who barely even knew him in order to feel even an ounce of control in his sad life. That isn't a man. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found it interesting, please give it a like as it really helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If you want, go ahead and check out my new podcast I have with a couple of friends called the NBR Podcast. You might find it pretty interesting. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check out the link in the description below to get an extra 3 months on your Surfshark subscription. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media as well. I always appreciate when people follow me on Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Link in the description. Channel memberships are back up too, and you can get all the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.